In lesson number 2 here of our first module, we're going to go ahead and we are going to take a look at the network life cycle in our network as Cisco describes it with a very, very cool phased approach. So we're going to go ahead once again here and take a look at the network's life cycle. Okay, at the life cycle of a network as described by Cisco systems. This is a really, really cool way for us to understand fully the network. That's right. We're bringing back the popular show, which of course is back now, I guess. I haven't seen it, but it's This Is Your Life. Yeah, it's This Is Your Life for the network. Cisco says, if you're doing everything right, now please, that's the first point that I want to emphasize here. If you're doing it right as a network designer and implementer, then you are experiencing, your network is experiencing life cycle phases. Okay? Your network is going to experience, is going to be built in phases. The first thing that we need to do for the CCDA exam, by the way, is memorize what these phases are and their order. Cisco says the model is called PPDIOO. It's got a nice ring to it. PPDIOO. And this acronym will certainly help us to memorize what are these phases and what are their order. Now, you certainly wouldn't want to launch right in and just start designing something. Before we do anything this complex, we need to prepare. And sure enough, that's the first P in our PPDIOO. And that is to go ahead and prepare to design the network. Then we're going to plan. So we're going to prepare and then plan. And then finally, we get into the design. Now, these 3 phases, we're going to break these down in this lesson, and this is going to be obviously our focus here in CCDA. So our focus is going to be on preparing, planning, and designing phases of the network. But we know that we're responsible for knowing what the other phases are. And that would be then after designing, we implement. After implementing, we operate the network. And then we optimize the network. And that may start this cycle all over again, by the way. As we're optimizing, we may see things, portions of the network, or the entire network itself that needs to be redesigned. And then we'll cycle and start all over again through preparing, planning, etc. So, for our network, we play a little game. This is our life, and we see the various life cycle phases of the network. Why would you want to engage in defined phases of your network's life? I mean, why would you want to go through and engage in these phases? Why not just, uncrate a bunch of Cisco equipment and start networking? Well, notice that one of the phases was to prepare and the other one was to plan. So often there isn't enough planning done. And when you're doing a lot of preparing and planning, inevitably you end up lowering the TCO. TCO is an important acronym in this class. It comes from business studies, and it is the total cost of ownership. So we lower the total cost of ownership through careful preparing and planning of the network. Something else that we get as a benefit here is the increased availability and, of course, the increase in reliability of the network when it's properly constructed. The other thing about breaking down your network into these phases is, I love this, it improves businesses' agility. In today's rapidly changing times, in the sophisticated business environment in which we live, it is very important to ensure that our business remains agile. By business agility, we mean our ability to become flexible in what we're doing as a business. A great example in the business world of this is the case of Netflix and traditional rental houses of movies. I mean, traditional rental houses went out of business left and right when Netflix came along. And I beat myself up. Netflix was one of those stock opportunities that I completely missed. I was one of the first customers of Netflix. It was a company that was a penny stock at the time, and it was yet another golden financial opportunity that I missed. I knew it was a great idea. I knew Netflix was the type of company that would become very agile. While they were initially just really giving the traditional rental houses of movies a run for their money by sending them to me in the mail, I recognized that the company would also be agile, and as that became a thing of yesterday to get movies through the mail, that they would flex. And sure enough, Netflix has flexed, and people are getting their movies over iPads and Wiis and PlayStations and all the rest. So that business agility is a wonderful, wonderful quality if a business is going to actually stay in business. And that business agility is something that we can achieve if we organize into a phased approach to the network's life cycle of something like PPDIOO. As a matter of fact, as we start to think about all the benefits of using a phased approach like this, we start to realize everything we had listed as SONA benefits applies directly here. So we are going to get scalability, we are going to get performance, we are going to get reliability and availability, we are going to get the all those wonderful benefits that we discussed with SONA. Well, let's go ahead and let's take a discussion of the first phase of the process, and that is the prepare phase. In the prepare phase of the entire network we're creating, or maybe we're just creating a new portion of the network, or maybe we're a consultant and we are about to take their old network and make a new network out of their old network. No matter what the case may be, we got to go in there and we got to make sure we have a clear-cut business case for what it is we're about to do. Remember, our goal, the overall goal in this course, is to build a network that addresses the business objectives of an organization. Remember, we are not building a network. We are not implementing technologies just because they exist and we can. We're always trying to design networks that help a business achieve its business objectives. As we build this business case, we are identifying the specific technologies that we're going to use, and we start developing an overall strategy that we will adopt in order to implement these technologies. So this prepare phase is really, really key. And if you're going to do the whole project right, you need to spend a lot of time here identifying what are the customer requirements. Identifying and pulling out of the customer what their requirements are is key to developing that sound business case for what you are engaging in. So a lot of interviewing is done as part of this prepare phase. We are going to speak with many, many managers inside the organization. This is a key element of this prepare phase. If you want to break it down here, and you should, and you are responsible for this information in the certification exam, if you break down the prepare phase, you're going to be speaking with all these different managers, and you're going to be following these steps. Of course, you are going to be identifying the network applications and services that you're going to target. Are we going to be doing voice over IP? Are we going to be doing video over IP? Are we going to be running Microsoft Office? Are we going to be running Microsoft's SharePoint? Are we going to be running collaboration software? Are we going to be running some type of database software and feature web-based data access, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? So we're going to identify the network applications and services that the company is targeting. Then we need to make sure, and this is so critical based on how we're going to do this, we need to define what are the goals of the organization. And by the way, these organizational goals don't necessarily relate directly to the technology, right? We're just saying, what are the overall goals of the organization? Maybe this organization wants to be one of the premier players in a certain business segment. Okay, maybe they manufacture some widget, and the major organizational goal is to be the #1 manufacturer in the world of that widget. We need to take a look at all of the various organizational goals, and we need to decide what role the Intelligent Information Network is going to play in achieving those particular goals. We then need to look at what are the organizational constraints. Okay, once we understand what it is the network is trying to achieve, we need to look at the constraints that might exist for the network, for the organization, excuse me. We're still talking about the organization here. Okay, so what are the constraints organizationally that this network that the organization, might be achieving? We can break down these constraints as far as like political, social, economic, okay? So we might have social constraints on the network. There might be political or economical constraints on the network. We need to look at the goals of the network, what the network wants to achieve, and then we need to look at things like their political, social, economic constraints. Another big one is technological constraints. So that could be a major just overall organizational constraint. Maybe they just have been absolutely behind in the technology race. Maybe they've just done an absolutely terrible job in trying to keep up with any modern technologies. Well, that would certainly be under the organizational constraints. That would be just a broad category of organizational constraint, and that is they just haven't kept up at all with technology. The next thing that we want to do is really focus on the technology and say, okay, what are the technological goals here that we are going to try and achieve? Notice those directly feed, they should, the organizational goals. We want to make sure that we are not just creating technologies in the company, like I said, for the sake of creating those technologies. And then we have our technical constraints. What are the specific constraints that we have that are going to impede us as we try and carry out our technical goals. Maybe, for example, we are trying to decide, does the company go with an EIGRP routing solution for their scalable routing protocol, or do they go with an OSPF solution? So maybe this is a key design scenario that we have to solve for this particular organization. Well, if they have absolutely no one on staff with any knowledge whatsoever of EIGRP, this would be a technical constraint that we definitely want to list. Maybe if through some partnership they have to use all equipment from a certain vendor in a certain area of their network. This is another example of a technical constraint. So, in the prepare phase, we're going to be doing a lot of interviews with many individuals from that organization. And we're going to determine what network applications and services are targeted, what are currently in use. We're going to look at organizational goals, organizational constraints, as well as the overall technical goals and technical constraints. So you can see the prepare phase is very critical, and we're going to be in this prepare phase for quite some time. Next, we're going to enter the plan phase. Here, we're going to characterize and assess the existing network, if there is one. And we're going to start to develop our project plan, which will dictate everything that goes on in the design and implementation and operation of the network. Notice in the plan phase, since it is critical that we're going to characterize and assess any existing network, we need to take steps to gather a bunch of information about the existing network. We want to do that in steps. In step 1, we want to gather all existing documentation. Hopefully, there is a lot of existing documentation that is going to be handed over to us. Unfortunately, the reality of this situation is many companies have done a terrible job of providing robust documentation, so we're going to be at a loss for documentation. We'll want to go ahead and start creating the gaps that exist in the company's documentation. Obviously, there's a lot of great tools that we can use to help us with that. We'll mention Cisco Works here, since it has a lot of tools that will automatically document the network for us. And then this would be the most sophisticated of tools, but obviously we can create our own diagrams in a tool like Visio, for instance. So we're going to be using specific tools for helping us with documentation. Remember, we need to gather all of theirs and then supplement it with what will inevitably be missing from theirs that we want. Great examples of documentation are things like layer 2 diagrams, and then logical layer 3 diagrams, and firewall documentation, and key things of this nature. We'll then want to go ahead and perform in step 2 an overall network audit. And we'll go ahead and talk to you about just what you would want to gather in that network audit here in a moment. And we'll also identify some cool sources of tools that you can use for auditing the network. And then what we typically have to supplement the network audit with is traffic analysis. Now, again, you could get lucky and all of this could exist as part of the existing network documentation, but I doubt it. I mean, maybe they've already done their own network audit. Maybe they've already done traffic analysis, but I tend to doubt it. Most networks that we go in today, unfortunately, are going to be lacking in these various areas. That's one of the reasons they're calling you in to begin with. The traffic analysis, I want to point out to you, can be done using one of two approaches. There is passive traffic analysis. And what passive traffic analysis refers to is you're getting statistics about how traffic courses through the veins of this network, and you are using their existing traffic in order to make that determination. This is what we call, again, passive traffic analysis. Contrast this to active traffic analysis. When we engage in active traffic analysis, you are actually having an application create synthetic traffic for your analysis. So we don't rely on the existing traffic and we analyze that. Instead, we go ahead and we generate synthetic forms of traffic like synthetic voice packets or synthetic web traffic or synthetic video traffic. And based on this traffic we create, we go ahead and engage in our measurements. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the types of tools that exist for us to perform our network audit. Obviously, there may be, like I said, we might get lucky, and there may be a bunch of existing documents that we can utilize for the network audit. The company may also be utilizing a bunch of existing network management tools that we can leverage in order to obtain the audit. Maybe they are using Cisco Works, and maybe embedded in the Cisco Works infrastructure is a bunch of information that we can harvest to prepare our audit. But obviously, we can go ahead and introduce new network management tools into the infrastructure that will allow us to perform this network audit. When you are looking at completing the network audit, you obviously need to decide exactly what information you're going to be gathering. At the very least, we need a list of all of the network devices that make up the infrastructure. When it comes to this device list, you want hardware models. It's very important to have software versions. For all of the different devices, we do need configurations. Now, maybe those are replicated configs. In other words, maybe they have 4 key adaptive security appliances. We'll be talking about more details about these devices later. Maybe they have 4 Cisco adaptive security appliances and all have identical configurations. Well, then obviously we need one baseline config for those 4 devices. But you get the idea. If it is a unique configuration, we absolutely want it as part of this network audit. We want the output from various auditing tools. I'll show you those here shortly. We want a list of interfaces and things like speed, duplex settings, interface capabilities. We want utilization values for key links. We want CPU utilization statistics. We want memory utilization statistics. And we also want a clear-cut list of all of the WAN technologies that are utilized by the particular organization. Now, when it comes to our Cisco devices, many of our Cisco devices have built-in audit tools. This is great. So a lot of the Cisco devices are going to have the built-in intelligence that can allow them to provide you with some pretty sophisticated auditing. Let's go ahead right now and run through several of these manual auditing tools. Let's go to a Cisco router. And the first manual auditing tool that we want to take a look at here is the show version. What a great logical one to start with. The show version command. Notice this show version command is going to give us some key network auditing output. It's going to tell us that we're running Cisco, whoops, let's try that again. Okay. It's going to show us that we are running iOS software on an 1841 Cisco router. So we're getting some key information from show version for our network audit. It then tells us what particular operating system we're running. Look at that. In fact, we're running the Cisco 1841 software for this 1841 router, and it's the Advanced Enterprise code. And notice down here, this coordinates with the exact operating system file name. So we can kind of correlate those two together. We see we're running 1841 Advanced Enterprise code, and down here we can see the exact file that's making that possible. Notice the version number is 12.4, release 24, and it is a T-train release. This T-train release means there's some features in here that are kind of like beta. Okay? There's some kind of beta features that we can experiment with on this router in this particular code. We get some contact information for Cisco, and then it tells us, let's see, look at this, that this device, whose name is Rack30R6, we can see that I am on the equipment of our rack rental partner, Graded Labs. So we are looking at a router that is in rack number 30, and it's router R6, and this is with our rack rental partner company, Graded Labs. We can see that our uptime is 3 hours and 45 minutes. So this device is nearing 4 hours of life since it was last power cycled. It, in fact, tells us that we did indeed do a reload, and it gives us a timestamp on that. So it tells us when we were restarted. Pretty cool. Once again, we have the exact operating system version reported here. And then down at the end of the output, it reminds us that we're on an 1841. Revision of the hardware is 6.0. It tells us how much memory we have, both non-volatile memory and volatile RAM memory. And then it gives us information about our processor board and our physical interfaces. This particular device has 2 fast Ethernet interfaces, 1 serial interface, 1 VPN module inserted, and again, it gives us information on the dynamic RAM and the non-volatile RAM, and it gives us information on the flash, where we would store the operating system. Finally, it gives us our configuration register information, and this configuration register setting will dictate how the machine boots up. Will it boot up and look for the startup configuration in the non-volatile RAM, for example? So this show version command is awesome and is one of the commands that's built in to Cisco devices that will enable us to perform this manual audit of the device. Obviously, another great command that we can issue on our Cisco devices is the show running configuration command. This is the exact configuration that is currently running on the device. And when you access your devices, by the way, you can typically notice I'm using the emulator called TerraTerm, a free of charge emulator that's called TerraTerm. And with this one, you can log to a file, and your ability to log to a file would make it enable you to capture all this information that you are doing with these show commands. So you don't even have to use a copy-paste approach in your terminal app emulation app if it's worth its price. In this case, even the free TerraTerm allows us to log what's happening on screen to a text file. And that's an easy way for us to go ahead and store as a text file this important data we're getting from this manual audit. So we've got our show version, very important. We've got our show running config, very important. Something else we can do, show process CPU. And here we can take a look at what exactly is loading the CPU. Okay, what is the CPU busy doing? And we can see that they give us the 5-second average, the 1-minute average, and the 5-minute average. So this is very, very valuable to see what the CPU is currently busy doing. And guess what? Over the 5-minute average, the CPU has been busiest on this device, providing the user interface for me to interact with it. And that's no surprise, right? In fact, you can see we've been 0.71% of the CPU has been sent in the last 5 seconds doing the exec process for us to interact with the device. You can see that this is a non-production piece of equipment now, can't you? Because if it were not a non-production, if it were production equipment rather, we'd be heavily loaded up with doing things like routing traffic, right? But here, it's just us interacting with the device for exploratory purposes that is taking up most of the CPU. Another great thing for us to be able to do is to say show processes, but this time the effect on memory. So we can break it down on just what is consuming the memory resources of this particular device. Pretty cool. So what's consuming CPU resources? What's consuming memory resources? Finally, the ultimate manual audit tool that we can do on this device, or just about any Cisco device, show tech support. Now, be careful with show tech support. Notice you can break it down, for instance, to just show OSPF information. Or you can break this down to show just CEF information. If you were to say show tech support password, for instance, you're saying I want all information that might be relevant to Cisco's Technical Assistance Center about this particular device and include password information in the report. Now, let me tell you something. Be careful with this. We have to be very, very careful with this because it will overwhelm the router's console where this information is sent by default. Here's what we're going to do. I'll go ahead and set up some logging. I'm going to log this output to a file. Just go ahead and store it on my desktop for now. And this will be called the tech support text file. Okay, so we are now logging this output onto the desktop in a file. Now, let me go ahead and run this command, and we see now our console is overwhelmed. Yep, we're like locked out of this console for a good 5 to 10 minutes, while the show tech support command does its magic. What is it doing? It's running a bunch of important show command verifications and providing this robust set of documentation for this particular device. Very cool. Now, like I said, one thing that's not cool about this is we are now locked out of this console. All right, so we'll go ahead and we'll pull up this show tech support text file here a little bit later on, and we'll take a look at some of the great information that that command did bring to us. So show tech support, show processes CPU, so show processes memory, show version, show running config, all great commands that we saw there at the command line that are built into our Cisco devices. There's also great network management tools out there that you can utilize to assist you in performing this network audit. We've mentioned Cisco Works. There are a wide variety of products you'll want to look at that fall under the Cisco Works umbrella. There's products that are specialized for your wide area networks. There are products that are specialized for your local area networks. There are products that are specialized for your VPN modules. So just lots of different products fall under that Cisco Works umbrella. There's the very popular What's Up Gold and very popular Cacti. There's NetQoS's NetVoyant. There's EtherPeak. Just a lot of different network management tools out there that could assist you with this audit. And there's also a lot of network analysis tools that are out there to assist you. And 2 of these are built right into your Cisco router. The CNS Netflow collector engine, this is a nice utility that will take Netflow data and store it and give you nice pretty graphs about the Netflow information. And SolarWinds Orion is an external product that does very sophisticated network analysis for you. But what I want to emphasize to you is the fact that NBAR and Netflow are built right into your devices, most of your Cisco devices, and they do indeed have some limited, but something is better than nothing, limited reporting that we can do at the command line. So both NBAR and Netflow are available to you right at the command line. Network-based application recognition is often used for classification and marking in quality of service, but we can also use network-based application recognition for network analysis. Let me go ahead and demonstrate that. So we can go and we can say, all right, I want to use this NBAR tool in order to do some network analysis. I don't want to use it right now for quality of service. Instead, I want to use it for network analysis. So let's see with the show IP interface brief, let's see what interfaces are enabled here on this particular device. And we see the interfaces that are enabled. Okay, so I have this virtual template interface of 54.38.6. We've got this fast Ethernet sub interface of 0.26 and 0.62. Okay, so a bunch of interfaces that are enabled on this particular device. We can go into this interface, for instance, this virtual template interface, and we can say IP NBAR protocol discovery. And there is this delay when we turn on this command. The IP NBAR protocol discovery command. And now there's this delay. And what's happening is we just turned on network-based application recognition's protocol discovery, protocol analysis feature on this particular interface. So now, by the way, there's a lot more overhead on this router's interface right now and the router itself because the traffic that's passing in and out of this interface is being analyzed. The traffic is being analyzed and it's being categorized as to what it is. Pretty cool. We can see these results with show IP NBAR protocol discovery. And it will break down for you the various types of traffic and the input packet counts and the output packet counts. Now you can see non-production equipment is in use here. I'm struggling to find any packets, input and output for any particular protocol. See, we got to be doing something on this device. By the way, look at all the different protocols that are being tracked here. I'll tell you what. Well, again, this is a non-production device, but you get the idea. How valuable, right? Categorizing the different options for protocols and then giving us these input and output packet counts. Very, very cool. And we get this built right in. Another built-in traffic analysis type utility that we have is Netflow. Netflow is a built-in tool on most Cisco equipment to, sure enough, as its name implies, gather information, gather statistics on traffic flowing through the infrastructure. Our own Keith Barker did a great article about Netflow for those of you that are interested in obtaining more information about Netflow. Let me show you how great it is, how easy it is to use Google to search the Internetwork Expert blog. So what we'll do is we'll jump over here and I'll show you just how easy it is to gain more information from our blog site about a particular technology. All right, what you do is just fire up Google and do a search, but restrict your search to our blog site. How you restrict your search to a particular site in Google is to say site:/blog.ine.com. So site:/blog.ine.com. Then you can go ahead and say Netflow, for example, and you're going to search our blog site for articles that have to do with Netflow. All right? One of the articles that we can see is OER, Optimized Edge Routing, Performance Routing. It's always watching. And this was done by Keith Barker on Optimized Edge Routing, which relies on this Netflow information. Now, this is pretty funny because, let's see if it's on the second page. I thought for sure Keith had done one on specifically Netflow itself. But I guess maybe I'm mistaken. Let's go to the blog site itself. Let me show you something else cool about the blog site. And here's a recent Keith Barker article on BGP. You got a BGP challenge to work through. But anyways, if you go over here, there's this category option. So you can go ahead and search for articles on the blog itself by looking at categories. And let's go to route switch IP services as a category. DHCP. Network address translation. Oh well, I'll get you that. I know he did a blog on Netflow. We'll get you that reference later on. But I'm glad you did see how I can search the blog site using categories of the blog itself, but most importantly, the ability to search the website for a particular topic. And what's interesting is I don't think he did a Netflow article, or it would have come up in that search. Okay? But very, very powerful. I mean, if you were searching for information on IPv6 articles, for example, maybe specifically transition techniques, something that we'll talk about, you would do site, blog.ine.com, IPv6 transition, and sure enough, the very first link is a blog article by myself on transition mechanisms part 1, and I walk you through manual tunnel creation. So very, very powerful when you use Google in conjunction with our blog site. Awesome. So lots of great examples there of network auditing tools. Why were we looking at that? Well, because we know the network audit is a key component in the PPDIOO phase network lifecycle. Specifically, the network audit is a key component in planning, in the planning phase of the network. When we get back from our break today, we'll go ahead and talk more about characterizing the existing network as part of that planning phase. We'll go ahead and reveal to you a health checklist, a network health checklist that Cisco provides us that we can use as a starting baseline point to determine the overall health of a Cisco network.